Laura, welcome to the podcast. How are we?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. I wanted to get you on because I heard your recent podcast with Bradley Simmons on the Get It Done podcast, and you're talking about the emotional relationship with money. And I was sat there actually scrolling on ASOS as I was listening to the podcast,
Classic.
and then I heard you talking about these things, and then I emptied my basket, closed down
Love.
the ASOS app, and then I was like, what is my relationship with money? And I'll be honest, since even preparing for this podcast, I actually don't even know where to start with that question. And I feel like probably a lot of people are going to be exactly the same. But before we delve into all of those types of things, talk me through. You are a money mindset expert, a financial well-being coach. Where did your journey into this space begin?
So it started like if we go back kind of like to when I was like a lot younger, when I was like 10. I first of all was raised in a family that didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always hearing very like negative stories and comments and phrases about money all the time. But also my like trajectory for my career was I always wanted to be an actress. And by the time I was like 18 and I was like, I'd done my A-levels and I'd done really well. Like I could have gone to university and done a good degree, but like I just didn't want that. I wanted to go to drama school, and drama school's like £15,000 a year. So I was like, yes. Now you can get a loan for it for a a student loan. You couldn't at the time. So I was like, looks like I need 15,000 cash ASAP. So I got a full-time job. I literally just like applied for this random marketing job at like 19 I was, and got it. And I was like, right, I'm just going to start saving because I was still living at home. And then by the time I was 22, I had the £15,000, and very last minute ended up deciding to go traveling instead of going to drama school, like literally 2 weeks before my start date. And I learned so much about myself, money, all of those things. And then when I came back from traveling, it was about 8 months I was away, I didn't want to be an actress anymore. I was like, that, midlife, quarter-life crisis. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore, but what do I want to do? The thing that everybody has around that age.
Yeah.
And I just set up a blog, set up an Instagram, and I just found myself talking about money. I think it's a topic I've always been really interested in, but I've also really always been interested in like self-help, psychology, how we work as humans. I did sociology in school and like did really well in it. Like I found it so interesting. I also did psychology. So it's kind of like this hybrid of all the different topics that I've been interested in. And then I started talking about it online just before COVID. And then it kind of just took off from there, really. So it was really one of those things where I would say like I fell into it. And now I'm here. I imagine myself being here for a very long time.
I think you're really good as well because your content's really relatable.
Thank you.
It's like it's straight to the point with a little bit of yapping in there on the content, which
exactly.
I really like as well because it adds just some personality to it as well. When we'll share your kind of Instagram and TikToks and stuff for people that do want to follow you because I do genuinely enjoy your content.
Thank
and
you.
It also reminds me I should probably start looking into that shit. And you shared something that said, if you want to be better at money, you need to look at your relationship at money. And as I said earlier, I'd never considered what my relationship with money is kind of ever, which is interesting because I feel like I'm someone that does actively look at like things, right? And self-development, a bit of a nerd of that. But the financial side of things I'd never looked at. And even since preparing for this podcast, I tried to write down like what are my thoughts on my relationship with money. And I actually have no idea. Could you just talk me through like what is the relationship with money? Like what actually is that and why is it important?
So I feel like, especially if you are like really into self-help and like personal development, you look at so many different areas of your life, right? Patterns that come up, your relationship with your parents, all the different things. And I think money sometimes gets forgotten about because it's seen as such a practical thing. Spreadsheets, numbers, budgets, we see money in society as like this practical thing, and we don't always look at the emotions. And I think people looking into the emotional side of money is something that's only like, it's quite new, it's quite recent. And looking at your relationship with money, like we make all of our decisions from a place of emotion, right? Like about everything, money included.
We like to think we're rational, but we are so emotional.
We're so emotional. And what happens is we make the decisions from a place of emotion and then we justify it with logic. Like that happens first. And we're like, oh, we did this because of this, or we did this because of this. Oh, that was okay. But, you know, like there's always an excuse or a reason or a justification. But it's always come from, like, most of it comes from a place of emotion, especially when it's like unconscious, like subconscious, you're not mindful of it. It's definitely come from emotion. And then the emotion doesn't always it's not always bad. Like sometimes it's like a positive thing or a neutral thing, but it's more about becoming aware of like, how do I view money in general? What are my beliefs around making money and earning money, saving money, spending money? You have different attitudes and emotions towards the different behaviors.
What are some examples of that? When you say like, what's my belief towards money? What's my attitude towards it? What's like a good example, and then like maybe like an unhealthy example, and then like a healthy example?
Okay, so for example, like so first off, like if we think about people who are really good at making money and earning money, they probably have an attitude or a belief towards making money where it's like, money's easy to make, money always flows to me, like there's an abundance of money, there's an abundance of clients, there's abundance of opportunities. But doesn't mean that they then have good spending habits. So I've worked with clients before that are amazing at making money. They make so much money, but they also spend it all. So that you wouldn't say that they're
Tough
like
life.
tough life. You wouldn't say that they're very like financially independent or secure because maybe they don't have savings or investments. You meet some people who have a very like scarcity mindset towards making money. Like, oh, well, this is the job I'm in, I'll never be able to make any more. Or maybe they run their own business and they're like,
I'm not deserving
of it, I'm not worthy of it. But maybe but that makes them really hoard money and hold on to it. So actually they've got lots of savings or maybe investments, but they're struggling with the making part. Like it looks different for everyone, and it also changes. So like my relationship with money, so different what I was when I was 16 to what I was when I was like mid-20s to what I am now. And sometimes it changes like consciously, like you're going, I now want to be better in this area. But sometimes it just happens as you go through like different seasons in your life. And I think what I would say, like if you're starting, is like looking at what parts of money do I feel comfortable with, and what parts of money do I enjoy, and then what parts challenge me, or do I feel limited by, or do I struggle with. So like, for example, when I was 16 and I got my first ever job, because I was raised in a family where my dad was always working and we never had any money as a family, I built up this subconscious belief that money is hard to make and hold on to. So when I got a job, I was like, I don't want to be like my dad. Like I want to be able to have money. So the go-to was, well, let's hold on to it. Let's get really good at saving. So it all came from a place of like fear and scarcity and lack, but I became an amazing saver because I was like, I need to hold on to it. But that also made me an awful spender. And that probably sounds like, oh, that's not a bad thing. But when your shoes are falling apart, or when, you know, you need something and I'm going, oh, I'm too scared to spend money because I'm worried it's not going to come back. Again, all of this is subconscious though. So like I didn't realize this stuff about myself until I did my financial coaching certificate. And then I was like, oh, okay.
These are things that I'd never seen before.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But like also they're things that, so we say that your money mindset gets set between the ages of 0 to 7, which is obviously so young. Like we don't really get to control what happens to us that age. But as you then go on throughout your life, throughout your teenage years, your adult years, things play out in different ways and you build new beliefs. Maybe your experiences strengthen your beliefs, and the way that you then handle and view money is in alignment with that. But the great thing about it is you can change it. So any way that you feel, like anyone who's listening to this now, if you're like, oh, I'm realizing that maybe like I avoid money, or maybe like actually when I think about money, I think that people with loads of money are really greedy, or whatever viewpoint you have, you can change it. That's the great thing about your brain.
Tell me more about the childhood experience. And I had a psychotherapist on the podcast a couple of days ago, and we were talking through how your mental health is so much to do with your childhood experience. And it seems like your money mindset is also so related to your childhood experiences, which is something that I'm coming to terms with a lot in life at the moment. Is it's not predetermined, but there's so many beliefs that are instilled to us unconsciously because we're not aware from the ages of like 2 to 7 or whatever. And yet they have such a significant and profound impact on who we become as adults. And I feel like it's this kind of age when they start cropping up for the first time, and you're like, oh shit, there's some fucking childhood shit that I've got to deal with here. Yeah, just tell me more then about this kind of like childhood experience and like, and how does that start to relate to us as adults?
So the way that I kind of explain it to people is, when you are younger, you don't have an analytical mind. So when you hear stuff or experience emotions or whatever it is, you don't stop and go, let's assess this. How, is this true? Is this a fact? Do I need, like we do as adults more often? As a kid, you just take everything to be true. What happens is when we have really strong emotional experiences, maybe something happened at home, that didn't make you feel good, and especially because as children, you don't just pick up on like words and language, you pick up on energy and emotion and like environment. So all those things together, like this big sort of mix of things, be it positive or negative, gets like stored in your subconscious. And what you end up doing is you end up building up a belief of how you believe something works in the world. So for example, if we apply it to money, I always used to hear the phrase, money doesn't grow on trees, which I think so many people hear. Money doesn't grow on trees, like I want, never got, you can't just ask for what you want. Like we don't have enough money, we can't afford
describing
it.
my childhood right now.
Very common. So what that then, as a child, you're then like, oh, okay, well, I shouldn't ask for what I want. And, oh, money isn't like is this easy thing. Like it doesn't grow on trees. So it's not, you build up your own beliefs around it. They then are kind of like stapled in at that age. And then as you're getting older, different experiences that happen, your brain like sees it, dissects it, and it either reinforces the belief that you already have, or if it doesn't, your brain doesn't pay as much attention to it because we have like a negative confirmation bias. So things that you tell yourself to be true, your brain goes out and looks for evidence to reinforce it because your brain's always trying to keep you safe. So if you're always saying things like, money doesn't grow on trees, money's really hard to make, your brain will look for evidence of that. So that's how it then impacts your like adult life, because as you're getting older, you have all these different experiences that your brain has seeked out to reinforce what you're saying. And I say, like, as an adult now, let's just say you're someone who is like, I'm really bad at budgeting. And this is really common because we don't get taught how to budget in school.
Financial literacy is just like, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Unless someone like who is good at it is teaching you, like a parent. Where are you getting it from?
Financial wellbeing coach.
Or me on Instagram. You are, you're making it up as you go along. So let's just say you always say, I'm not really good at budgeting. I don't enjoy it. I've never been good at it. If your brain will reinforce that. So if you had 1 month where actually you did all right with your budget, but you just made one mistake, your brain's going to hold on to that one bit and be like, see, told you we weren't very good at it. And it ignores like all the good stuff that happened, the place where maybe you did save or you did turn down
more
something.
More than 90% of savings that you have made for the 10% that you didn't, kind of thing.
Exactly. So like, because your brain is this mechanism that it doesn't care if you're happy or not. Like it's your sort of more conscious job to keep yourself happy. Your brain is just keeping you safe. It's kind of doing its job, but until you bring awareness to it, like you said, it wasn't really until I listened to this podcast and then started making notes for this one to be like, oh, hang on a minute, let me actually assess how I feel. And even then, it's like questioning, like, but what is my relationship with it? Like,
I still have no idea. Like, I've literally hours now spent on just pondering this question. Yeah. Where do people fucking start?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, what's your biggest challenge with money? Like, would you say you're a saver? Would you say you're a spender? Like, what's your sticking point when it comes to money?
Fuck. Again, that's not even a question anyone's ever asked me before. I'd say probably in the last 2 years or so, and I don't mean this to be fucking egotistic or anything, but I'd rather just be open and honest. Yeah. I don't think people like talking about finances because if you talk about money, you sound a little bit, if you don't have money, you kind of sound okay. If you have money, then it's kind of like you're a bit of a dick. So I'd rather just be honest. So I've probably like aggressively invested over the last couple of years because I don't know why. It was more just I know that's a good thing to do, and I probably will have a use for it in the future. Like having money in the future is good. Yeah. But I probably invested like 90% of my net worth. I barely have any savings because everything is aggressively into it. Yeah. And I actually looked at this on the way here and I'd say probably, I think it is 96% is in stocks. And most of them are all like tech companies in America, which is probably a really bad thing to do. But over the last couple of years, the portfolio is up probably about 40%. Yeah. It's worked. I actually almost wish it hadn't worked so well because I probably got the wrong idea on how investments work and how you should diversify your portfolios and how you should do things a little bit more sensibly. But I think I had enough of an idea of what was happening pre or kind of post COVID, a lot of tech stocks
Yeah.
massively dived. And then I was looking at like the Facebooks and the
Yeah.
Googles and stuff, and they dropped by 80%. So I was
Yeah.
logically thinking they're probably
Gonna
going to
go.
come back up at some point.
Yeah.
So I waited for them to return halfway up, chucked pretty much all of my money into them. And then AI booms also happened since then. So I've kind of chucked a little bit more money in. So I feel like that's sensible.
Yeah.
But I also don't have an exit strategy. Like
Yeah.
I've done it and I'm like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And then it goes up a bit and you're like, fuck, I got money. And then you're like, fuck, I actually haven't got any money. And then you're like, so that's, I don't know what your question was, but like.
My question, so you're obviously, so investing is obviously something that you are comfortable with.
Yeah.
In the way of, you know, enough to get started. Obviously it's made a bit of a profit, but there's the emotional part of like, oh fuck, I don't really know
what do I do now?
What
like
do I do?
Yeah.
But you're obviously quite high risk because the fact that you've chucked most of your money in,
So high risk.
Yeah. Right. So like, whereas I know a lot of people like, and this is more common for men. Whenever I have conversations with men about finances and investing, they just seem to have this either knowledge or understanding about investing and are already doing it. When I speak to women, it's the complete opposite, which is so, yes.
Do you think men have a higher appetite for risk in general?
I think that investing has been around for hundreds of years. Like the first stock exchange opened in like the 1600s. And women have only been able to have their own bank accounts for the last like 75 years, something like that. Like about 50 years, because it was like 1975 or something like that. The women could
that
get
in
their
itself
first.
Crazy, right?
Crazy, right? So we as women have been left out of the conversation around money. When you think about investing, you think about old white men, like in suits, looking at stock charts. So
fucking dudes, don't you?
Right? And men know about it. They tell their uncles, they tell their brothers, they tell their sons, they tell the friends, male friends talk about it, you know, on the golf club, we're generalizing here, but like generally there is usually a male in your circle who knows about investing that can pass on that knowledge. Way less common.
If you look
in
at
women.
the financial industry just in general, like a lot of my work is partnering with big like investment firms and finance firms and stuff like that. And like if you look at their networking events, for example, 90% male.
Yes. And like the financial services industry, 90% male. So it's like they've already been in that space. So women have already been just like excluded. And when you don't see someone that looks like you doing it, it makes it, you think it's not for you. So you kind of have that one. Then you also have this idea around, obviously you've got the gender pay gap. So women in general have less disposable income to play around with, like to actually like invest. And it's not that women have a lower risk appetite. It's just that women view risk differently. So women are more likely to like invest in groups and like chat with the girlfriends and be like and like feel it out. So women do better investing in groups in the way of like syndicates or like if groups of friends are doing it. But it's something I found so interesting over the course of my career over the last like couple of years is like I literally meet men and I'm like, it's not that I'm not having to educate them, but they're like, oh yeah, I'm already investing. And I go, oh, have you done a course or did you? Well, no, like, you know, and it's always like, oh, my friend told me about it, or oh, my boss told me about it, or oh, my uncle did it. And then it's always, because it's a man, it's always been enough for them to have an interest to look into it. But in addition to that, in the media, in society, there was this piece of research done and it looked at like 7,500 articles aimed at men and women. At men, 60 to 70% of the language was build wealth, earn, invest, calling them financially savvy, recommending investing apps. But with women, 70 to like 80% of the language was splurge, save the pennies, cut back, luxury items, and it those subliminal messages in media has an impact on you as you grow up because you start to think, oh, that's more for me. That's more normal.
Exactly. To do the behaviours that society is putting out there in these subliminal messages.
Yeah.
How else does society impact our spending habits then? 'Cause we've got like the gender differences there.
Got the gender differences.
What else?
And I do think that it's really interesting because when we think about like consumerism and capitalism and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, we are constantly marketed to. We are constantly being told that we should spend our money to buy things to make us happy because we're not already happy enough or good enough as we are. Like, that's what marketing is, right? Even like things like razors, like when female razors came in, I don't know, like 50, 60 years ago, before it wasn't a thing. And then suddenly out of nowhere, women having hairy legs was a really bad thing because one company that created this product and thought we can market this to women, and then like, oh, don't be, you need to be all soft and shiny and smooth everywhere. And then it just gets embedded into society that women having hairy legs or hairy armpits is gross. But like 50, 60 years ago, that wasn't the case. So a lot of these things, and that's just one example, and it goes the same for men as well, but we are constantly being told that certain things aren't good enough, so we have to spend money. And now that we're chronically on our phones and we're being marketed to constantly 24/7, it's like we are being, we are taught how to spend our money. Like when you get into school, you get told get a good degree, get a good education, go to university, get a good degree, you'll then get a good job, you then buy a house, you settle down, and you like spend your money, right? Like enjoy and spend your money. We don't really get told how to do the investing part unless you're kind of like in the upper circles where like that's done and it's spoken amongst themselves. If you're kind of like, I don't like to say like lower class or working class, but usually more often those are the people that don't get taught how to do that stuff. And then naturally, like, who do you turn to? And this is why I love social media so much, because we're now in a position where socials are it's democratizing financial education, and you don't have to be in a certain circle. You can just go and find someone that looks like you online and you can get some good information. But we've obviously shifted from like just the practical stuff into the more emotional stuff, and like bringing it back round to what you said when I asked you about your relationship with money. You have a high risk appetite, you've got the investing side of it, but when you're trying to figure out your relationship with money, and I guess what's holding you back, you have to go to the drawing board of like, well, what am I working towards? Like, what are my goals? And if you don't know, that makes it so much harder to figure out where maybe you're being held back with your beliefs because you don't know what isn't aligning. So for me, I talk about this concept of like achieving my big happy goal, which is something within the next 5 years. I want to be able to be running my business, building my wealth, and traveling. Like I want to be taking my business around the world. That requires me to have a certain amount of savings, a certain amount in investments, and a certain amount of cash flow. Because I know what the goal is, and I'm using money as the vehicle to get me there, I can then go, where am I holding myself back? But if you don't know those things, it makes it a bit harder, because you're like, well, I don't know what bit is hindering me. Because really, investing is such an important part of your financial plan. The fact that you're doing that is amazing. So that's already like one tick. You're good with risk. You are able to educate yourself to invest money. You're growing your money. You're building your wealth for the future. Is it that maybe like, do you struggle to enjoy your money when you spend it? Are you concerned that maybe you don't have as much in cash for like an emergency fund? Is it that, like, do you know what I mean? There's so many different things there's so many different ways you could take it. But part of that comes down to knowing your own goals and what you're working towards.
You touched on a point earlier as well about how like money is for evil people.
Oh yeah.
What did you mean about that?
Okay, so like in society, there are narratives around money, and it's different for all different societies, right? Like I talk about this all the time, but think about the UK. Money's very taboo. You're not allowed to talk about your salaries with like your colleagues. You get in trouble. You shouldn't ask people how much certain things were. If you go to America, and obviously America has a lot of issues, so we're not
Really?
Really not that I know of.
I didn't notice that on the news every fucking day.
But if we think financially, because of the whole American dream, the way that they talk about money is very open. They love how much are you making, how much are you doing this, oh, I've made this much, I've got this much invested, saved. Like on a whole, they're a lot more open. So depending on the society you're born into, you're going to have certain beliefs that you take on about money. Now, one of the ones that I feel there is in the UK is like this idea of like money being evil, or money making you greedy, or money making you selfish. That's one that comes up all the time with my clients. And like what that does is, if you have that belief, or those kind of beliefs, it will make you act in a way where either you don't bring too much money in, or if you do bring money in, you get rid of it quickly. Because if you think about it, if you believe that money makes you evil, greedy, or selfish, most people don't want to be those things. So therefore, the thing that's going to make you that, you're going to repel. So that's why that like narrative doesn't really help anyone, because I'm a big believer that money is an amplifier. If you are a good person, the more money you have, the more good you can do. The more generous you can be. You can give to independently owned businesses. You could run your own charity. There's so much good you can do. if you're a bad person or you don't have very good morals, the more money you have, you're just going to do shit things. Like, we can't help that. So it's not noble to not have money or repel money just because you don't want, because of that belief around like thinking that it makes you evil or greedy. It's better to change the narrative and be like, the more money I have, the more good I can do. And then call it in and be good with your money and then help other people. And I think this idea that like money, you know, like the money is the root of all evil. The actual phrase is the love of money is the root of all evil. So
That gets fucking missed off, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Like, that's ironic. And I'm a big believer that a lot of these narratives are pushed because it keeps a divide. You know, it keeps the rich people really rich, and then it keeps the people at the bottom, you know, just surviving.
There's kind of or another quote that you mentioned the other day was, money isn't good or bad. It's just the emotion that we as humans attach to it. What are your thoughts on that?
So I believe that in life, with everything, you get to choose the emotion that you have towards something. But you have to be obviously self-aware and conscious of it to be able to change it for it to be what you want. When it comes to money, money is just money's made up. Like, especially nowadays where we don't even have physical money and it is literally just numbers on a screen.
Just a number on your bank app, isn't it?
It's mad. Like, it literally is made up. And, you know, if we go back to however long ago, whenever like money was shifting, it went from us just using gold coins. Like, before you just like swap goats and flour. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got a goat, you make some flour for me. Like, that was a value exchange. The point of money is to be able to exchange services and products fairly under a universal like currency. And money will continue to shift in so many different ways, but the emotion that you as an individual choose to attach to it, like, I believe that money is neutral. It's just a thing. Like, it's just numbers, it's just paper. It's the only reason why it's valuable is because as a society or as a world, we choose to place value on it. Like, that's the same about, like, sound controversial is not the right word, but like, think about marriage. Marriage is a law, you know, this law-abiding document that bounds you to this other person. It's still just made up. It's just made up because we as humans choose to like go, well, this is the law.
And I've got a ring, so that makes it real.
Exactly, it makes it real. Or like, for example, property. Like, you sign a paper and you say, oh, this is now this bit of paper is the thing that says this house is mine because I've paid money for it. But like, mortgages and like owning property didn't exist like hundreds of years ago. Like, you would just set up somewhere and build yourself a house. Like, it's only over time that we have started to like capitalize on things and turn things like for us to have ownership. And it's like the same attachment to money. I don't know, I could talk about this for ages because it's so like, it's such an interesting view on like, money is made up.
Yeah, it's also
Money
like
is made
not
up.
spoken about enough, and reminds me of a book that you referenced on a podcast, which was Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And
books.
it's almost like financial wisdom, but like a very different narrative that they're putting out there. And I haven't read the book, but ChatGPT summarized it for me, and I looked at some YouTube videos on it. And it's essentially, there's a few concepts in it, but one of the concepts is, yes, kind of save your money, but at the same time, you've got to live your fucking life. And I feel like that in itself is such a juxtaposition where it's like, save money, but also go and spend your money and enjoy your life as well.
So I read that book this year, and like, this sounds so dramatic, but it changed my life because I have always been a saver. I've always been like a holder onto my money, and I got a lot better. Like, when I went to Australia and I spent £15,000 that I'd saved for drama school, I obviously built a much better relationship with spending because I was like, money is actually really cool. Like, look at, like, I talk about my traveling days all the time, different stories, different things. It changed me as a person. When I read this book, so it talks a lot about this idea of, yes, saving and investing is important, and building wealth, but you cannot take money with you to wherever you go after you die. Like, you don't put your net worth on your tombstone. And you know that whole thing of like, people don't remember when you die, people just remember how you made them feel and who you were as a person. It's got nothing to do with the amount of money you have. If you spend your whole life saving, investing, making as much as you possibly can, and that's like your North Star, and it's all focused on money and security and whatever. And what happens is a lot of people say, I will do that when I'm 60. I will do that when I retire. I will do that when I hit this amount of money. But as you get older, whilst your net worth usually increases, your energy and your health decreases. So the things that I want to do now at 31, I won't want to do when I'm 60. Like, I won't want to, so, on Friday, we were talking about it just a minute ago, like, I went to a big gig to see one of my favourite DJs in a giant warehouse. Like, that cost me money. Now, there is a balance between always doing those things and not saving and investing, and then never doing them. Like, I believe that saving, spending, and investing all have their own importance. But yeah, what happens, and in the book he gives loads of stats. It was more about Americans, but same applies here. What happens, people save and invest loads, they get to 60, 65. That's the time when they apparently say, like, oh, this is the point where I'm going to start spending. They have been in such a habit of saving and investing that by the time they get to that point, it is the habits of holding onto their money are so ingrained, they don't know how to enjoy their money. And then their wealth continues to build, and their life experiences don't. Like, money itself doesn't make you happy. It's what you do with that money. It's what you spend it on. It's the way that you utilize it. And in the book, he's like, obviously when you're younger, your money is usually at its lowest, but your health and energy is at its highest. And then it like sort of flits. And he thinks the sort of like 40 to 50 age is best, because it's like when you've got quite a bit of money and you still have health and you still have like quite a bit of time. But this concept of like finding the balance between not having the extremes. So not just saving and investing everything, but not just spending everything. Like, the things that have brought me most joy are things where I have spent money, been with friends, made memories, and like, they're the stories that you're going to tell when you're older. And I don't know, it just really changed my whole opinion on financial independence. The concept of dying with zero is like, you get to a certain point where you hit most of your wealth, and then at a certain point you should start drawing down on that money, so by the time that you do die, you are as close to zero as possible. So he believes like giving inheritance to your kids whilst you're still alive and not waiting until you die. Like, decide how much you want to give to your kids, give it to them whilst you're alive and you get to see them enjoy it, and whilst they probably need it more, because by the time you die they've probably got their own wealth. So it's like, what's this? And then whatever's left over you get to spend and enjoy in your retirement in your own way.
That was going to be one of my questions, is if you die with zero, then what are you leaving your kids? But the idea then is to give it to them once they need it, rather than when they're kind of getting older as well anyway. Because if you, let's say the average person is like, I don't know, 40, 50, when maybe their parents pass on and then they receive the money. It's like, that's probably when they've got the most financial stability anyway. I suppose the concept then is, then it gets passed on to like grandchildren and stuff. So this book perhaps suggests that we should have a good balance. This is a lot harder to do in action, isn't it? But have a good balance of spending money whilst we can enjoy the experiences as a young, healthy individual that can go traveling and do all these things and go out till, who knows what time o'clock in the morning. But then at the same time, have the mindset and the emotional relationship needed with money to be able to build future wealth, which does include learning about how to budget, how to invest. To have that future money, you're probably going to have to start considering long-term investments as early as possible. Your pension being probably one of the easiest ones, because it's automatic. Your employers somewhat sort that out for you as well. And then maybe having your own proactively putting investments in for the long term. So putting money into like an ETF, like a Vanguard, the S&P 500, where you kind of put it in, don't have to think about it too much. And then in 30, 40, 50 years time, that £10,000 turns into like £250,000 in an ideal world. Is that the kind of thing that
break down.
people should be looking at?
Yeah, and I think that as I talk about this idea of going through different like seasons and eras, so sometimes you're going to be in a saving era. Like let's just say you really want to buy your own house and you're like, I really understand the power of property and building wealth. And so therefore the next 2 years I'm really going to focus on saving, getting that house deposit, you know. But then maybe when you buy the house, you're like, I've been saving for 2 years. I've now got an asset. I'm going to be in a bit of a spending era. So it's okay for the balance to not always be like, 30, 30, 30 across spending, saving, investing. 33, 33, 33. But education, like educating yourself. Why do I need to be investing sooner rather than later? Because the sooner you invest, the less you have to put away to make a bigger difference when you're older.
Talk about that quickly in terms of like compound
interest.
in interest investing. Like I love on trading 2-on-2, you've got these little like pre-made pies. So like groups of companies, and you can put in how much am I going to put in right now, how much am I going to put in per month, and it gives you a rough idea then of the scale of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Obviously it's like a guesstimate.
Yeah.
You can see if I put in 10 grand now and then I put in 150 quid a month, in 30 years I'm going to have like, I think it was like £600,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you go on another 20 years and it's like 1.2 million.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how's that doubled in a quarter of the time towards the back end of that?
Yeah. So like when I first learned about investing and I learned about compound interest, like that was my favorite thing. I was like, this is amazing. And it's the bit that whenever I teach people about it, they're like, oh, wow. But one thing that people always say is like, that's amazing. How do I do it quicker? I say, no. Time is the most important thing. So essentially compound interest is when you make interest from your interest. So when you put money into something and it gains a profit, gains interest, when it rolls over to the next year and you make interest, you make it on how much you originally put in, like how much is your own money and how much is the gained money. So I see it as like free money. And over time, what happens usually happens at like the 15 to 20 year mark. The amount of money that you're making in interest exceeds the amount that you've put in yourself. So that's where the power of compound interest comes in, because your money is like growing exponentially. It's like multiplying, but you need time. So the younger you start, the less you have to put away. And I think what happens a lot of the time is people say, I'm going to wait to invest until I've got more money. I'm going to wait 5-10 years, until I've got X amount. But if you wait too long and you invest even more than you would have been at this point, you can't like claw back the losses that you've made by not starting earlier. So that's the powerful thing. And I do think that when you think about investing, even if it is literally £20 a month, £50 a month, like something small that you can afford to put aside and not have to think about, not have to touch, it makes the biggest difference moving forwards. And I say to people, do you want to work forever? And everyone's answer is always like, no. I'm like, well, why are you acting like you want to work forever? Because if you go to work and you spend everything you have, maybe you just save a little bit, you cannot save your way to wealth. You have to invest your way to wealth. The only way that you can quit your job or drop down less hours is by having a pot of money that you can live off of. And the aim is that over time, instead of swapping your time for money, so going to a job, your money is making you money so that you can step back. And like investing just gives you that freedom. But I think a lot of people, because they don't get taught about it and it's not spoken about a lot, people think it's too good to be true, or people think it's too complicated.
And if it's too complicated and there's a level of uncertainty, then people dismiss it. They're like, no, that's not for me. And it's almost like mental block.
Yes.
You're like, that's not going to be a thing that I do because I do not understand that.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that was me 4 years ago. I was always a bit afraid of investing until I listen to podcasts, YouTube videos. Like there's so much information out there. And now I sign up to a couple of newsletters. Brew Markets is like a daily one, and it gives you like the top 3 things happening in the world at that time. And it's like, that's enough for me now just to have a rough ongoing idea of what's going on. So I'm not scared of it anymore. But I think previously I definitely was. And I feel like a lot of people probably dismiss it through the fear of the uncertainty.
And that even is like the same energy towards like pensions, budgeting. It's like, if you don't know something, it makes you fear it because we're scared of the unknown. And that concept gets applied not just to money, but to like all of life.
Everything.
That idea of, what's the phrase? Your brain prefers a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. So you're more likely to pick a shitty situation that you know and understand because it's predictable than something unknown that could be the most amazing thing. Because we fear the unknown. It's like, that's scary, that's unsafe, but actually that's where a lot of the magic happens. And that's why people talk about needing to lean into discomfort and trusting that you will make the right decisions. You know, if anything happens, that you're just going to make the right decision with the information that you have and just keep repeating the process. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if things go wrong. That is life. But educating yourself and understanding that you, trusting yourself as well, like having the capability to take that risk or to dissect a piece of information and actually apply it to your life. And also this thing of like, if other people are doing it and it's working for them, why can't it work for you? Why is it, oh, that works for them, but it doesn't work for me? Like being
That's a
able to assess
self-worth
that.
thing though, isn't it? That's a
100%.
I'm not worthy enough to have that thing that that other person has.
Yeah. And I think self-worth is like the way that you view yourself in life. There is a huge correlation with what then happens with your money. Like I had a client, this was a couple of years ago, she was making maybe 120 grand a year. And she did have high expenses. Her money would go every single month. She was spending literally like 10 grand a month. And obviously, look, I'm sure we could all find ways to spend 10 grand, right? But she really consciously like wanted to save, wanted to clear her debt, wanted to invest. But every month it was like, where is this money going? And what happened was we just realized that she was bullied in school and she had really low self-worth. And it wasn't until we like really got to the point of that, she was spending money on things that she thought was going to make herself feel better. And it wasn't always just like makeup and clothes. Like it was loads of different things. And it was like searching for happiness externally of herself by using money as the kind of like vehicle to get there, as opposed to doing the deep inner work and trusting that you are just worthy and deserving as a human, as you are. You don't have to spend money to like reach that point. You don't have to spend money to be worthy or deserving. Like money should be something you spend because it's adding to your life or because it's a really conscious choice, not because you're feeling forced to do it from this kind of subconscious bad relationship with yourself.
For that validation
For
externally.
validation.
Is that the end result that we're looking for when it comes to our money mindset in general? Is it that comfortability in the inner self-worth that we are worthy of having money, we're confident with money, we're empowered with money? Is that what we're aiming for here?
I think that's one of the things. I think it looks different for everyone. I guess like there's not a silver bullet approach because personal finance is so unique and so personal. But yeah, that is a big part of it. Like understanding that you are worthy as you are, but also knowing that it's okay and it's safe to have money and to trust yourself to make decisions around money that are going to suit you and the people around you. And that this idea that because money is neutral, okay, cool, well, it's a game, it's fun. How do we just use money to have a better life? And, you know, anybody can get financially independent at any point. If you have a lower desire for, you know, expensive things or you don't have as many expenses, you could have a lower income and get financially independent, meaning you don't need to work anymore because your money is making money in investments quicker than somebody who is making 3 times as much, but they've got really expensive tastes. So their bills are really high. They go on really, you know, so the difference is it's more about like, what do you want for your life? Like, what is it you want, money aside? Like, figure out what you really want. And a lot of the time what happens is people come up with these dreams, but they call them pipe dreams. And they're like, I could never afford that, or it's never possible for me. But actually, sometimes you can sit down and work it out and you go, oh, when we look at it, you know, numbers wise, financially, I don't actually need that much. Or that's a bit cheaper than I thought. Or that's not as far away or unachievable as like maybe my brain is making out.
Maybe it is far away, but actually here's some things and strategies that I can do over a period of time that's going to make it more achievable and attainable.
Yeah, and like it's the whole thing of like you don't have to look at the whole staircase, you just take the next step. So if you go, wow, I'm here right now, I'm making, I don't know, like 2 grand a month, but really my ideal life is I'm probably want to be spending like 6 grand a month plus saving investments, and maybe I need like 8 grand a month for argument's sake. That feels like a massive jump because you're here and you're here. Okay, well, how do I just get it up one section? And I think a lot of the time comparison is a big issue. Like, we compare ourselves to everybody around us, our friends, our family, people that we meet, you know, at events, people that we see online. And a lot of the time, I've spoken about this concept before, when you see someone and they're dripping in designer, they're going on all these nice holidays, that doesn't mean they have loads of money or that they're financially independent. you're just seeing what they've spent. You don't know what they've got in savings or investments. You don't know that if they got ill and their income stopped tomorrow, whether they'd be like on the streets. Like, you don't know that stuff, but yet we naturally just look at it and make a judgment, and we're like, oh, I wish I was there. You know, especially with social media as well. Like, I see people that are like, I see this girl pop up on my TikTok the other day. She was 16. She's like, hi, I'm 16 and I've got a $10 million business. And I was like, who is this girl? How does she do that? And I
How
had a
do
bit
I
of a
get
moment
that?
where I was like, she's half my age and she's making literally so much more money. But I had to be like, I don't know anything else going on in her life. So there's no point me comparing myself to her. But it's a constant, like, conscious reminder that you have to be mindful of, like, the things that you're feeding yourself.
I think it's really good. From all of the coaching, the content, the conversations that you do, what's the kind of one thing that you want people to know or action in terms of all of the messages you put out there? If there was one thing.
I guess if we think about it on a mindset perspective, the thing that I would want people to know is that how you are with money now does not need to be how you always are. I think people, if they've always acted a certain way about money, or they've always felt a certain way about money, they fall into this trap of thinking that's how it's always going to be. Our brains are so powerful and they can change. Like, we have neuroplasticity, which means we can create new beliefs, new behaviors, new identities, and it's possible for everybody. But I think when we fall into that mindset of thinking, I've always been this way, like, this is just who I am, this is just how I am, you keep yourself caged in. And if you look at people that have a certain life that you really want, and you have that, like, oh, I really want that, but the second thought is, I could never have that. That's not me. That's the bit where I'm like, I urge everyone to have this trust and this belief that anything can change. Doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but knowing that like, I'm a real big believer that if you've been given a dream or if you've been given a goal, you have it for a reason. Like, anybody can achieve anything, but you have to get out of your own way. And part of that is working on your relationship with money, which is questioning it, becoming aware of it. And like, if they're like you and you're like, I don't really know where to start or like what the next step is, the first thing is always awareness, which is asking myself things like, how do I feel about spending? How do I feel about saving? How do I feel about investing? How do I feel like, what were my earliest memories of money? Who influenced me the most of money? And even if you just get one nugget out of asking yourself those questions and you can see how it applies to your life now, that's where you can start to make a change. Or you might have no issues and you'd be like, do you know what? I've actually got a really good relationship with money. Like, I invest, I'm quite confident budgeting, I make an okay amount of money, like, I'm quite happy. Great. That's great. We love that. There doesn't have to always be a problem. But I think, yeah, questioning yourself on it is really important.
I think also surround yourself with that type of information as well. Like your TikTok and your Instagram, for example, like there are small snippets coming through almost like daily that just start to build up your awareness. And I feel like sometimes when there's these big topics of like, you know, those line of questionings that you just suggested, then it's like that's in itself can be quite a scary thing to just jump straight into it. So I always find if there's a new topic that I want to start understanding, I just follow a couple of creators in that space that talk about it. And even if I just scroll on some of them and then I start building up a little bit of it, I'm not taking notes or anything, but I'm just building up a familiarity, and I just start seeing different words and different concepts and different topics. And then there's a couple of questions, and then maybe I ponder it a little bit, or maybe I notice it, notice a particular behavior in my day-to-day life. And that builds the confidence that I need to then look into a topic a little bit more officially or a little bit more formally. And that's why I'd really urge all of the listeners to go take a look at your Instagram and your TikTok, because for me personally, that's also enlightened me and opened my eyes to a lot of the both challenges, but also like things that I'd want to start working on myself and building and understanding over the next couple of years anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's how you use social media for good. Like, instead of it being you follow people from a place of like, oh, I want their life, oh, you know, because it's a bit self-sabotage, isn't it? Sometimes we follow people that make us feel shit. Unfollow them and follow people that are feeding your brain with good information in anything that you're interested. Like, I think, and that's part, like, you obviously have a really good growth mindset because you believe that, okay, there's this topic they don't really understand. I'm not even ready to like fully dive into it. But if I follow a couple of people and I let it kind of settle, I trust that over time I will be able to learn it, understand it. And it's the same with money. Like, any kind of new thing that you want to learn, just put yourself in those spaces. Use social media to fill your brain with good stuff and knowledge instead of like self-sabotaging, making yourself feel shit.
I call it edutainment. When you want an Instagram
Edutainment.
page that's like educational,
Yeah.
you don't always want educational shit, do you? So you want a little bit of attainment.
Yeah.
So then you have edutainment pages,
Yeah.
which I like. Where it's a little bit of mix of both. It's like a self-development or like useful topic, but they've put a nice educational or nice entertainment spin on it.
I would say that's what mine is.
Where I totally agree, and that was my next question. Just to close up now, where do you want to send people, or where can people find out more about your stuff and your things?
So I'm on Instagram and I'm on TikTok, and I also have a podcast. So on Instagram and TikTok, I'm literally just Laura Ann Moore. And and for the corporate people, I'm on LinkedIn. And then I have a podcast called Mind Money Sell, which is all about the emotional, the practical, and the spiritual sides of money. So you can go to any of those places.
Cool. Laura, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.